Welcome to the Renegade Port. I'm Jonathan.
And Ramon is present. And for now, Jonathan, we actually have joined the 21st century.
I wasn't sure there by having electricity.
Yeah, thankfully we have it now. I don't know what stage we're on, maybe 69 without consent. But while we have electricity, let's make hay while the sun shines, or whatever that fucking saying is. So
Well, we don't
unfortunately,
have
no
sun either,
Kifness.
so we're pretty
Yeah,
screwed in
that's
general.
true.
No sun, no electricity. But yeah, only one of them can really be blamed on some of the stupid humans in the country.
Well, first of all,
So
let's just go back just 1 second. So
yes,
we were supposed to have the Kifness on. We had him on once. It was a terrible recording. We don't not going to release it because it's just impossible to hear. We tried to have him on a second time. His plane was delayed, and he only arrived in Joburg like at 7 p.m. and the studio was closed. So we will have him on. We are in contact, but unfortunately not for the moment. So I do apologize if I or if we gave the impression that he would be on. He was on essentially, but we were, things happen, and we'll have him on early Jan. But anyway, yeah, and, not much to talk about, Jonathan, for this final episode of 2019. The year's been really good. We've had 6% GDP growth. Lots of people went to jail for corruption. The ANC went below 50% of the election. And there's, property rights have been strengthened. So I don't know what there's to talk about, really.
yeah, everything's just great, Ramon.
Great. Thank you so much for the year. We'll see you
That's the
next
end of the
time.
show. It's all done. Well, firstly, I just want to say, I mean, this is maybe we're doing this a bit back to front, but going to be the last show of the year. Uh, I've had a lot of people messaging me, either like DMs or open to anyone's phone. They thank them for doing the show, and I really enjoyed it and whatever. So yeah, thanks to everyone who's listening the whole year, and the years before that, if you have. Just sometimes it's really surprising. We record the show, as everyone knows, not for any personal gain necessarily. I mean, we obviously enjoy doing it, but it's not profitable, to put it that way. This is not a profit incentive driven show, at least not currently. And it's nice to know that people are enjoying the show, listening, downloading. Obviously, you see the downloads, but it's nice to meet people and hear from people as individuals. So just quite appreciate that. Just on the year, Ramon, the ANC dropped below 50%, but the EFF went up to 10. The property rights are about to be extinguished once they push through their amendment of the Constitution, which they may very well do while you and I are on holiday. And everyone else is on holiday or assumptively not watching and focusing on what's going on. What was the other good aspect of what's happened this year?
We've had a 6% GDP growth. Don't you know that?
Ah, oh no, I must have missed that part amongst the technical recession. So which is about to become a real recession thanks to load shedding.
Well, listen, there's been 10 years of sort of technical recessions. So we sort of like dip in and out. But if you look at the past decade, it's basically a depression at this point. I mean, anyone that says, oh, it's not technically a recession can go really fuck themselves at this stage because we've had low growth, anemic growth, under 1% for the majority of the past 6, 7 years, I would argue. I mean, when does it become a depression at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it's look. I made this point on Twitter in the past week or two, and the main point, and I think this is something you want to get into. The main point is for 2020. If you're listening to this show and you're listening to similar shows like it, other commentators, analysts, who kind of don't say what the normal stuff you expect to hear is. They're not the people who are typically on the radio station that you're used to going to. They don't generally get columns on the second and third page of the newspapers you're typically reading. then you're doing something right. But really, if this is the first time you're stumbling upon our show, you're sitting on a beach somewhere and someone told you to download the show, you need to start listening to more alternative stuff, because everything we've been saying over going on 4 years now has pretty much been accurate. So far, our only inaccuracy, my inaccuracy, was saying Herman Mashaba would be a pretty good shot. But other than that, we've been pretty much spot on about most things. We predicted this further collapse of the electricity grid, and the irrecoverability and the nature of most of the state-owned enterprises. So I think. Yeah, I think it's really important that people kind of broaden their horizons a little bit and stop listening to the same idiots who tell them the wrong things and then just spin into a new wrong thing. I mean, I actually could not believe a tweet sent out by Adrian Basson yesterday to kind of Valdemar Palsa posted a tweet saying something to the effect of, look, ANC voters voted for this, and he's 100% spot on. And Ajahn Basson was like, really? This was caused by, all the other problems in the world. And what McKinsey, yes, McKinsey did this, because McKinsey, well known for destroying electrical grids and state-owned enterprises worldwide. The truth is that McKinsey wouldn't be engaged with the government if it wasn't for them engaging with them. That's how think tanks work. That's how strategic organizations work. So it's just laughable. And a man like that, who very clearly has an agenda, who very clearly has motives, which are not pure in any way, has outed himself as, number one, either being completely ignorant of the facts and completely ignorant of what is going on, or as someone who is untrustworthy, frankly, and he's manipulating things in a certain way to get outcomes that he wants for whatever reasons those are. Relationships he has, perhaps on the back end, that we don't know about, the way he keeps his job, his little Afrikaans cabal, and not to go after the Afrikaans community, but his little cabal that he's got going on there, him and Peter du Toit, and a couple of others, that when Varashni makes a mistake, she gets fired. When I forget the other gent who was deputy editor at Huffington Post makes a mistake, he gets fired. But no, Adrian Basson, Peter du Toit, they just carry on, no problems. Those people need to be stopped being listened to. They are dangerous, they are unreliable, and potentially they are malignant.
Well, I mean, I think these sort of people have perpetuated one of the greatest hoaxes, in South Africa, which is the New Dawn. It's up there with apartheid was right wing, and climate change is real. It's those sort of hoaxes that really take a lot of spin and strategy to pull off. And I don't know at what stage they will actually find out, but sooner or later they'll need to sort of understand that Cyril Ramaphosa is thick as pig shit and just as nutritious. The man's dumb. The man has always
nutritious?
Been dumb.
Oh, yes. As the pig shit.
As nutritious as pig shit, yes, which is apparently not very nutritious as far as I'm aware. Not that I have experience in eating pig shit, but you eat shit every day by being a citizen of this country, because people are fucking stupid. Fucking Jabu Mabuza with his fucking hat gets paid 800k a month to be the CEO of Eskom while also being a main supplier to Eskom. And the guy doesn't know the difference between a fucking sledgehammer and a conveyor belt and what causes malfunctions in the system. You have the president of the Republic of South Africa calling Madupi and Kusile the crown jewels of South Africa when they will be ready. And he saw them for the first time this year, apparently. This year, he's been in the war room at the ANC to turn around the SOE since 2014, and he hasn't seen Madupi until this fucking year. And you expect this guy to run the country, right? So when it's in his personal capacity, he retrenches half his workers at his farm because of economic restraint, despite being a billionaire, by the way. When it comes to public finances, there's no retrenchments whatsoever. All we're gonna do is just get better leaders in the SOEs and clean them up. And this is the narrative spun by mainstream idiots like Ferreira, like Adrian Basson, like Peter Bruce. It's all about the personality. It's about Zuma bad, Cyril good, Thabo okay, Mandela saint. No, that's not how you look at political parties. You look at the underlying ideology of the political party, you look at the institutional competence of the political party, and then you make a determination of what they're going to do, what they say, what the consequences of the policies are, and then you can make a determination about whether this is good or bad for South Africa. All they do is look at the man in the suit who's in charge at this time, and somehow that man in the suit has absolute power over the whole thing and will instantly do reform and change and make South Africa great. Bullshit. The whole way through, it's just bullshit. This is not America. If you're the president of the country in America, you basically can do what you want, and you're the head of the Republican Party or Democratic Party, you can do what you want. In South Africa, you don't do that. Parties have underlying ideologies, and no one grasps what the NDR is, no one grasps what cadre deployment is, no one really understands what BE is. It's a mafia state through and through, irrespective of who you put in a suit at the front of a podium talking about the crown jewels of Medupi and Kusile. It is absurd. It is infantile. And these people should really, really, really be mocked mercilessly for being wrong all the time. All the time.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. I mean, look, even in the States, the reality is if you don't have a Congress that's on your side as the president, you have a difficult time pushing through your agenda. That's seen previously with Obama and a Republican Congress, seen now with Trump and a Democrat Congress. Legislation-wise, so Trump's doing certain things. There's foreign policy stuff happening because the president's in charge of that, essentially. There are some state changes, and there are certain executive orders, all of which can be reversed, by the way. But as a legislative agenda, not much. But in South Africa, I agree with you fully. The main issue, and reflecting back on this year, people need to go back and download, if they haven't listened to, and perhaps even if they have, download again the Anthea Jeffrey interview that we did. I think possibly the best podcast we did this year and one of our best of all time. You need to understand the underlying ideology behind politics in this country, why we are where we are, where we came from, where the ANC's ideology came from, the fact that they believe that they are running a mini Soviet state in the southern tip of Africa. That's what is happening here. And it doesn't matter that the Berlin Wall came down and that the Soviet state collapsed. They believe that they are still ongoing with that project. That's how these people were trained. Mkhonto Sizwe was trained through those processes. The political schools are through those processes. Hell, even the concept of political school is essentially a Soviet idea. There's no understanding. So you have morons, absolute morons. The names you've mentioned, Max du Preez as well. I don't know if you've mentioned him already. These are the guys who people are listening to, and they don't know what they're talking about. They've spent 30 years, some of them 40 years, just basically going any way the wind blows. So whatever is popular at the moment, you mentioned climate change, which will piss off a whole bunch of listeners, but the point is in the 1980s, I'm sure you can probably, if you had access to the records, you can find an article from Max du Preez talking about the global cooling that was coming to kill us all, and now you would be able to find him talking about the global warming that is going to come and kill us all, the climate change or whatever it is. The reality is when Zuma's in power, then just before Zuma is in power, they're all big fans of Zuma because Thabo Mbeki is the Antichrist. And then when Thabo Mbeki goes, it's a great thing. And Jacob Zuma, he's got this sordid background, but really that's not such a bad thing. The guy needs to be given a chance. 2008 the country's in a hole. 2010 it's in a bigger hole. 2012, 2014 we're still blaming the 2008 economic crisis. Every other third world country, developing economy has recovered. South Africa just doesn't recover. No, that must be everyone else's problem but this. Then eventually the rot is just too much to bear. Public opinion eventually turns, and so our overlords in the media buildings turn around and go, all right, fine, it's time we turn against Zuma. They make some quick calls. They have some meetings with their advisors in Lutuli House, with some of their advisors from the EFF, and they say, "Look, guys, we don't want to make you look bad, but we need to go after this one guy of yours. So how can we do it to best keep you, afloat? So we're going to go after Zuma, but we're going to make it as if the ANC is still the answer. The ANC is still where you need to find your place. The ANC is still where you need to direct your vote, your money. The corporate world still needs to pay attention to them." And they have a dominance over the media architecture, and that's what they push. So once Zuma now needs to go out, you had guys protecting Zuma and defending Zuma up until 2015, 2016. You had guys saying he needed to be given time. He needed time to correct. It wasn't him. It was these Gupta guys. You had all of these stupid comments. And then Cyril came in and they launched this thing called the New Dawn. And let's be very blunt about this. The New Dawn was not something Cyril on his own came up with and everyone looked at and gave a fair shake to. That was not the story. The story was Cyril releases this New Dawn thing instantly. Every newspaper, every website, every editorial is talking New Dawn, and they're talking New Dawn in a positive way. They're pushing photographs of Cyril on a promenade in Cape Town with a whole bunch of laissez-faire white people who live in Sea Point. They're pushing, Tumamina and all this other bullshit that went along with it, and that's what they're pushing as a narrative. And you need to be able to start spotting this, because I think it's been most obvious with the New Dawn to be able to see the media manipulation of the political narrative in this country to try and fool the average man on the street into believing whatever these cheerleaders, because that's what they are, whatever these ANC cheerleaders who don't wear the leather jacket that Gwede Mantashe gives people. They keep it in their cupboard. It's there, it's hanging there, but they never wear it, because they don't want you to know that actually they're not an editor of a newspaper. They're not a respected journalist. What they are is an ANC activist who will do anything for the ANC until their dying breath. And even if they wrongs in the most terrible ways, even if they collapse the entire country, they will not stop from telling you that is where your faith should be placed, in these people and in this party.
It's very similar to those guys at the end of apartheid who stuck on till the end. They'd be like, over my dead body will the white rule end in South Africa. Meanwhile, it's fucking 1995 and the Springboks just won the World Cup. But you still had those people that are no, this is fucking bullshit. It's illegitimate. It's actually unbelievable what the mainstream media have done to this country, and the narratives pushed, all which based on falsities, by the way. That there's a hunger for land reform is needed, B is not to blame for the problems at Eskom, Cyril's Great New Dawn, Batohi as the MPA, whatever, president, whatever, director, will clean up. Keith Sweater at SARS is great. Keith Sweater's friends with Trevor Manuel, who's friends with Cyril, and Trevor Manuel's fucking up Old Mutual despite also being on the board of another company that services and supplies Old Mutual with other things. These people are cronies through and through. Name, Jonathan, this is for you and listeners, name one thing, just one thing, Cyril Ramaphosa has said or done or acted in a way that is merely competent. In what way is he merely competent? He gave the EFF a big boost by allowing them to put EWC on the table. Instead of being a real leader and says, listen, this is my fucking policy. I'll put it on the table when I want to. We're not ready for it yet. No, he said, cool, let's go ahead with it. He pushes NHI despite having no money to do it whatsoever. Stage 6 load shedding happens, and where's he? Oh, he's fucked off to Egypt for bilateral relationship talks with Egypt, because they are such an important fucking ally, aren't they, Jonathan? Really, what the fuck? We don't even import camels from Egypt. Who gives a shit about Egypt in South Africa right now? What has he done? He says there's no farm murders at all, ever. It's never been a problem. It doesn't exist. And he calls Mudupi and Kusile the biggest turds on the face of the earth, crown jewels. Is this the man to lead South Africa to a successful future? You really fucking believe that? If you do, A, you Adrian Basson, or B, you belong in a fucking mental asylum. And it is simple as that.
Yeah, I agree fully, and look, I mean, it's this sort of disease we've created in the country by shitty policy. We've got a, Cyril forms part of a very small group of an elite who became very wealthy because he was in the right place at the right time with the right amount of melanin in his skin. You can take any person off the street that if they had been in the same place and the same time, they would be a billionaire today. It's as simple as that. If you had a time machine and you could go back to Codesa and you could put your gardener in the same seat as Cyril Ramaphosa, your gardener would become a billionaire. It's as simple as that. It's as sad as that because we all know BE is an utter failure. But what happens is Cyril Ramaphosa ends up being propelled into this position of wealth, an assumptive position of power, and also an assumptive position of confidence. Let's remember Tokyo Tsekwale, who was also in a similar boat to Cyril Ramaphosa, was our Minister of Human Development, as far as I recall, and he was utterly useless at that job.
What did he develop?
Nothing. No. He was useless
human
at that
settlements.
job.
Human settlements, by the way.
Yes, yeah. So he wasn't particularly good at that. And so what I'm saying is Cyril spends 15, 20 years sitting on boards, but not because he is amazing at anything that he does, but because if you're in the corporate world, you know this. If you're sitting on a board or in any kind of meeting, and there's, let's say, 10 people around the table, the chances are you can lose 5 of them. Like you could literally do frontal lobotomies on 5 people sitting at that table and it would make no difference to the outcome of your company or the quality of that meeting. And
well, in most cases, it will improve the board, to be honest.
So the point is that we're learning this sort of in real time because most people are turning around and going, and we had this conversation. We had this conversation about Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma or Cyril because those were our choices before Nasrec. We sort of said, well, if you got to pick, and you did kind of have to pick. You had to go, do we want Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who, by the way, just because I don't think it makes a difference who you put in that position currently, what you really end up getting. But we kind of were a bit split. You were like, well, maybe Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is better because she continues essentially what Zuma was doing. Or Cyril might be better because you hope a guy who sat on like the boards of banks and the boards of mining companies, and he maybe during this time he actually, number one, he was in charge. That's the real hope. He knew what was going on. He was directing stuff. Worst case scenario, he picked up on a lot of stuff of what it takes to run successful companies, and he kind of understands that South Africa is South Africa Pty Limited, and maybe that translates in some way. Well, it's very obvious, as you say, it doesn't translate in any way whatsoever. Some of us have imposter syndrome. Some days you sort of sit up and go, geez, am I really doing what I'm doing right now? Like, should I be here? Like, I'm sitting in theater and I've anesthetized the patient and I go, wow, I can't believe that I'm the anesthetist. I'm sitting here, and some people have that kind of imposter syndrome sometimes where they almost can't believe they are what they are, or they've achieved what they've achieved. But Cyril is actually an imposter. He is a man without the competence, without the requisite ability to do the job he has been placed in, over and above the fact that he is sitting in the middle of a highly ideological organization intent on sucking this country dry and leaving it basically as a non-functional, desiccated mess.
Right, and we can only assume that he actually wants the same thing at this stage, to be honest. I don't care what the internal machinations of the ANC are. You're the president of the country. It's country first, then party. For him, it's party first, then country. He hasn't used any levers of the state to take control of the ANC itself. Good tyrants, good dictators, good benevolent dictators shoot the first five behind them and the rest get into line. He doesn't do that. He says, no, we need unity, we need appeasement. And somehow the so-called reformers and the so-called communists and the so-called unions and the looters, they will all come together and have a consensus about how to fuck this country up in the best way possible so that everyone feeds at the trough. So anyway, Cyril, you're dead to us. You always have been. And anyway, on to other things. As I tweeted quite a while ago, Eskom's been around since about 1922. Coal's been around for millions of years, rain as well. And I think Eskom found out 5 days ago that if you mix rain with coal, it doesn't work very well as a combustible thing to power power stations in South Africa. So I think we are on a good step now. They know that. So maybe they'll build a roof over, the coal stocks, maybe. Or maybe they will use coal and not rocks that was delivered to them through the coal contracts. Anyway, so stage 6 load shedding hit us last night. I still don't know what that means. No one knows what that means, let alone Eskom. Any ideas on what load shedding, what caused it, what it means? Do we have crown jewels or not? Jonathan Witt, I think it's important for the nation to know your opinion on this as a doctor. Because as a doctor, you have more competence than probably the CEO of Eskom to tell us what's happening here.
Yeah. Just on the as a doctor part, every time we have load shedding, the hospital grinds to a halt, essentially. There's a whole bunch of things that just don't happen. And I'm talking the state services. And so there are generators, but there's certain things you can't do on generator because they place unnecessary risk to patients. Because if you lose the generator, then you could be like knocked out under a ventilator when you lose that generator. So there's all kinds of externalities to the load shedding, and I'm sure in every industry that applies. There's a lot of, I suppose it would be conspiracy theory at this stage, but I just want to juxtapose it to what happened with our fuel. So the theory is that actually the reason why this whole wet coal thing is bullshit. It's the same excuse they've used, I think, 4 years in a row now. Every time there's been load shedding, at some point they've said, no, we've got wet coal because it's been raining. Yes, you would think by now they would build a roof. Apparently too difficult for them. You can even build these things called buildings, and then you can store stuff inside them. It's how most humans keep their shit dry.
Sorry, before you continue, I actually had a brainstorm right now about creating employment in this country. We could hire maybe, I would think, 100,000 people and give them 100,000 hair dryers. And they can walk around the coal stocks with the hair dryers connected to an outlet, and they can dry the coal with the hair dryers.
I like it. And what you could do, you've created 100,000 jobs, but I'm going to do one better. I'm going to create another 100,000 jobs with 100,000 umbrellas. And these people are going to stand over the coal and try to keep it from getting wet. But obviously it will still get a bit wet because umbrellas don't completely protect you. So you'll still need your hair dryer people. So we've created 200,000 jobs on the show, Ramon, which I think is impressive.
And they say this podcast doesn't offer any solutions. Well, there you go. 200,000 jobs, just like that.
200,000 jobs, just done. So the conspiracy theory is that what is happening is the coal that's being delivered is still based on a Gupta contract, which was signed with Eskom. And I'm not sure how much truth there is to this, but the bottom line is whether it's Gupta coal or not, that the coal being delivered is basically low-grade coal. That it's very I'm not sure the exact technical term, but essentially it's not hard coal. It's very powdery. And that actually the good coal that we have in this country, because coal is one of our major minerals in this country that we have. We have enough coal to power this country for the next few hundred years if we wanted to. That we're actually sending our good coal on ships. It's being loaded at I think Richards Bay, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it's being loaded up, and we have Chinese vessels just loading tons and tons of coal and taking it back to mainland China. And while I say that this is a conspiracy theory, I would like everyone to remember that we sold our entire reserve of fuel, petroleum fuel, oil reserves. We sold this for basically nothing, a few million rand, as I recall. And at one point, I'm not sure what the current status is, but at one point had no fuel reserve. So if our refineries had shut down, we would have just run out of oil as a country. So I think that's an interesting take. But I think the bottom line on all of this is the state cannot run a piss up in a brewery. It is that sort of terminology, that phrase, come to life. You need to, when you run a business, run supply chains. You need to be able to get hold of the stuff, the raw materials you need to create whatever product it is that you want to sell on. The private sector manages to do this, even despite government getting in the way repeatedly. The private sector manages to do this all the time. A good example will be if you go out tonight for some dinner and you decide you want to eat a burger. That burger, they've made sure that even though the government has given them load shedding, stage 6, they've made a plan to have diesel in a generator to make that, to be able to heat an element to cook that burger. They've made a plan that even though the government has done nothing about people burning trucks on the N3, they've still made a plan to get that beef onto your plate and the bread roll and all the other stuff that came. They've made a plan that even though the unions will do everything to prevent people from coming to work, and you employing people and having a direct relationship with individuals for their work, and then paying them for that, they've made a plan to make sure that they have chefs in the kitchen to cook up that burger for you. The government is unable to follow any of those processes. They're unable to make sure that the supply chain on the various items they need don't fail. They're unable to ensure that when they need to fly aircraft, they have the requisite people, and that those people don't just go, we don't want the bankrupt company not to pay us increases, so you will pay us an increase or we just won't do anything. And so this is an example of not being able to run a piss up in a brewery. The ANC cannot run a piss up in a brewery, and they apply that to everything they own, which unfortunately is many, many, many parts of the South African economy.
I'm not sure if you saw Paul Theron. He used to be on Bruce Whitfield's show. I don't know if he still is, but he has a YouTube channel, and it's called Blunders or something like that. And he starts off his latest video with "The retards are at it again." And he says, let's see, what do they want to regulate? Cell phone companies, highly profitable, competitive, give coverage to the entire country. Not fucked, but the people who fucked up water, electricity, and roads want to fuck up the cell phone companies. It's a great video. I think you should watch it. Just look for Paul Theron or Blunders on YouTube. Excuse me, and watch it. But it goes back to the previous point. It's about who do you follow and whose advice do you take? You always pick the advice of the pessimist. That's what we've been doing for about 3-4 years since this podcast started. The pessimists like Magnus Haystack, the pessimists like Mike Schisler, like Paul Theron, like Russell Lamberti, like Franz Cronier, basically name anyone who's been on the show, who give a coherent argument for their view that is not based on wanting to be popular, and that is not based on ingratiating themselves to the ruling party of this country. And Paul Theron, fits in quite neatly with his Blunders YouTube videos. I watch all of them once a week, and more people should actually use the language he uses. When he says the Competition Commission are a bunch of retards, he is not wrong. When he says water is fucked, he is not wrong. More people should use those terms to describe reality, because that is reality. So there's challenges or there's mismanagement or corruption. Who knows what the hell that means? No one knows what that means anymore. Just say it's fucked, completely fucked, by arseholes and by retards. And I think that is a much more efficient message. So DA, for a nominal fee, I will come and do messaging for you based on these principles. Or Freedom Front Plus, if they're willing to pay me as well. Anyone really. We should start using more swear words to actually describe reality.
I was thinking the other day about strategy. If you're a political party, we talk about it all the time, both on the show and just with each other. And one of the things I thought is, imagine if there was a political party who just said, we're not engaging on topics we think are stupid. Like we're not doing it. We're not engaging on topics that don't matter. We don't believe they matter to average South Africans. And I tell you what, if we're wrong, don't vote for us. Like let's say the DA turns around and goes, "We're not talking about BE anymore. We're not talking about it. We're not talking about it. You can go read what our position is on it. We're not talking about it. And our plan within the first 3 years we would govern the country would be not to even go near it. We wouldn't even change the current status quo, which would piss off a lot of people like you and me. But it may make some people who think it's a great idea go, oh, okay, fine, whatever. You're not going to do anything about that. What if they just focused on the things that people actually want? What if they said, look, we only have 3 selling points as a party. We're going to make sure that Eskom works. We're going to provide you with electricity, and we promise you within a year of coming into power, there will never be load shedding again. How are we going to do that? Well, we'll do whatever is required. If it means selling Eskom, cool. It means selling Eskom. But we are going to make sure, absolutely, without a doubt, that you will have power. Number one. Number two, we are going to tackle crime. And, they can come up with whatever policy they want that's going to do that. I would argue that in South Africa, that should be a hardcore policy because the truth be told is the average South African actually still agrees with Bheki Cele when he says shoot to kill. That's a popular policy, frankly, for criminals. You may not like it. You may not want that to be a policy. In a liberal state, certainly you shouldn't. But the reality is criminal action and the way you tackle crime should be rather more to the hard side of things than to the soft side. So that's number two. They come in electricity, crime. And then number three, they come in and go, we are going to fix education. We're going to fix education. How are we going to do that? Once again, many different ways. I would say you reverse on what the current government does. We believe in school vouchers, but even if you don't believe in voucherization, you could look at other methods, break SATU, whatever it happens to be. If they just said those are the 3 things we're campaigning on, we're not campaigning on anything else. I tell you what, we promise we won't change anything else in the status quo for the first 3-5 years we govern. The first term we govern. Give us the first term. No changes on any of the other shit. Because the truth be told is, as we've mentioned before, those things are all a hindrance to this country and they all stand in the way of progress. However, a lot of the private sector has factored in a way to work around the sort of legislation and the sort of state standing in their way. And I think if a political party just focused on basic shit that people want done, just give me power, just give kids a decent education, make sure that they get that, and just make sure that I'm unlikely to be shot because I won't hand over my car or my cell phone or whatever it is. I think that would be a good way to go. But instead, we're still arguing about stupidity and stupid policies.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's even simpler than that. Just say, in 10 years' time, under DA rule, what would you want for your children? You want your children to be the best educated in the world, the safest in the world, the best fed, they have childhood nutrition needs, and to make sure that they can self-actualize and, step up the hierarchy of society in their work. Just do that, and then everything else sort of falls into place. If you want, educated children, you need to change the education sector, and it doesn't need to be a universal law. It could just be like opening up the framework of education, privatizing the entire education system and say, if you can't afford it, here's a voucher and do what you want. You can go to the robotics class, you can go to the art school, you can go to wherever you want. Your parents could choose for you based on your strengths. You want the kids to be grown up so they're not dead when they're kids. So you solve crime in a particular way. How do you solve crime? You devolve police. You make the community responsible for voting for the local station commander. You ease gun rights so that more people are able to defend themselves against criminals. And so on and so on and so forth. And basically, if you care about children for the future, you don't incur debt on their behalf. Every South African citizen now has about 60,000 rand worth of debt imposed by the government, i.e. government debt that falls on us. So you just don't borrow anymore. You cut the state down to its barest, the barest bones you could find. So everything flows from wanting to have children born today self-actualizing 10 or 20 years' time. And all the policies that flow from that should be based on one thing: think of the children. And anyone who disagrees does not think about the children or doesn't care about children, and you fucking nail them in public for not caring about children. It's a winning strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think both could work. Frankly, I think that's good marketing. That's a good way to go in terms of think about the children. And if you don't agree with what we're saying, you don't care about the children. I think that's good. I also, as I say, I think a party like the DA has been lost in the weeds for too long, arguing about silly things, responding to Twitter debates and Twitter arguments that just are not even worth giving time to. There was a point at which, for 3 weeks, I think, the DA and where they stood on BE, for example, was just what was reported in the news about the DA. I mean, that is an absolute catastrophe for a party like that, especially a party that the news media, as we spoke about, loves to sell as a white party. They love to sell as sort of, they love to sort of push that narrative, that popular narrative. Oh, well, if they get back in power, the apartheid's coming back. They love to push that kind of. It's the same as a Swat Kafar, right? It's the exact same sort of attitude. In the apartheid days, you could never possibly sort of unban the ANC. You could never possibly negotiate with these people, because at the end of the day, it was these sort of dangerous terrorists who were just hell bent on killing you. That was all that there was to them. And now it's the same kind of thing in reverse against a party like the DA, or anyone, frankly, who tries to do some good. That may not always succeed, but it's just, oh no, they're too dangerous. They could never be let into power.
Well, I mean, just look at the difference. BLF was overtly pro-black, no whites were allowed, and it was always a sort of just the black only party BLF did this. No one ever said, why the fuck are they black only? Is it legal? Is it not legal? What about diversity? Blah blah blah. No one ever says. I mean, BLF were, to me, perfectly legitimate in saying no whites should join our party. I'm sort of happy that they exist for that reason. But if you think about the outrage about the perceived whiteness of the DA and the overt blackness of the BLF, which one was scrutinized more? The perception, the fake one, right? And that's why Donald Trump, or Hillary Clinton, actually coined the term fake news, and Donald Trump just weaponized it against her. But yeah, I'm not writing off the DA quite yet. I think Gwen's back there, and I think that, I don't know, I think they just need another few months, maybe until the policy conference in April, and for John Steenhuisen to become the official leader.
My worry is that the DA is basically the Tesla Cybertruck, okay? And what I mean by that,
I love the Cybertruck. I want one.
So I hate it personally, but what I mean by that is that under that hideous skin is essentially all the correct working parts. Quite efficient. Everything does what it needs to do. So I think the DA now gets to a point where it has the right ideas. You've got someone like Gwen pushing policy. You've got someone like Helen, who's federal chair, who is really, probably this country's sort of Optimus Prime as far as liberals go. And yes, that's in a good and a bad sense, because sometimes she leans left as a liberal and sometimes she leans right as a liberal. But that should actually make most people happy, because the classical liberals will get happy sometimes and not others. And the lefty liberals, who sit on their porches in Cape Town, will also be happy sometimes and not others. But she sort of fits that mold. John as well fits into a similar mold. So you've got like the right underpinnings of what could be a very successful party, certainly as a governance party, and with the right ideas for where the country needs to go. But you've got this sort of skin over it that doesn't look very nice, and that no one will defend. So when someone throws a rock at the window just cracks. It doesn't go, no, this is our position. This is where we stand. We're proud of this position. This is who we are. This is what we look like. And if you don't like it, fine, vote for someone else. But we believe in what we say. We believe in our principles, and we're going to carry on. And the reality is you want to know why the ANC still has so many votes. Yes, they're the Liberation Party, but they're also the Liberation Party who is stuck firm with their principles and who hasn't wavered. And yes, it's taken 25 years for people to see that those principles don't work, but they've been the strongmen of politics in this country by turning around and going, we stand by these principles. We're going to keep going with these principles because we believe in these principles. And until the DA can learn, and this is my worry with them, that they've got the right underpinnings, but until they can learn to sort of stand up and go, if you don't like what you see, tough, then don't vote for us. No worries. We don't care. Until they can turn around to the newspaper media and the journalists who are going to give them shit no matter what, until they turn around to them and say things like, I know you are from such and such a paper or such and such a publication or whatever it happens to be. You never report on us fairly, but cool, give me your question, in a Trump-esque kind of fashion. Until they're willing to do that, they are going to be sort of steered off of their path every single time, in my view.
That's true. That's true. But I think the Cybertruck analogy is actually very useful here because you hate it. I think it's fucking gorgeous and fantastic. And you know what? Elon Musk doesn't give a shit what you think. He cares what I think. Not that I can buy one because they're not available here. If they were available, I would buy one. But Elon Musk doesn't give a shit what you think if you hate it. He's going to sell plenty to those who love it. And that is the key idea of what the DA should be. Create that binary, create that conflict, and be
Sure.
like, here we are. This is what we believe in. If you don't like it, don't fucking buy us. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine.
And as
So
I've
the
said
DA
repeatedly,
must
this is the
become
age
the
of
Cybertruck.
this is the age of politics we're in now. This is the age of politics where you stand by your principles and you stand firm. And the firmer you stand, and the harder you fight back against people who try to be negative towards your positions and principles, instead of backing down and being polite, the harder you fight back, the better you do. Donald Trump learned this lesson, and he's going to teach everyone that lesson again in 2020. Boris Johnson is about to win, possibly by a landslide, and he has backed down on some of his principles as it happens, but not most of them. And it's the same lesson to be learned. The DA just needs to learn that they can be proud of their principles. They do not need to do that broad church bullshit. They need to do this is the church we are. This is the church. This is the DA church. This is what we stand for. No, if you think 7 different things about education, that's not okay because we don't think 7 things. You can think it's cool because we're a liberal party. Think what you like. But our policy is very straightforward on education. This is where we stand. We will not be bullied by an op-ed on News 24.
Yeah, and I think that might happen. It's still a bit early. I think they still need to sort of get that policy conference through, win it. The so-called liberals need to win it. John needs to become permanent leader. And then I think you might see something. I'm willing to give the New Dawn quotient or whatever it is to the DA in this respect. I'm a little bit hopeful, not completely sold at the moment. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Next year is a big year for the DA. It can make or break them quite a lot. Now, Jonathan, the Competition Commission has told telecoms groups or companies that they must actually, sort of help each other, give a leg up. So if you basically, this is their thing. If you have customers, you must give them free shit as a sort of basic right. And if you have a competitor who's smaller than you, you must give them free shit too, so that they can be equal to you. The words equality of outcome comes to mind when I read this. Have you ever heard of a regulatory body anywhere in the developed world telling corporates and companies that they must give free stuff to their customers and give free stuff to their competitors? I don't think it has happened yet in the Western world. I know it's happened in the Soviet Union a lot, and it happened in Cuba, perhaps. It's happening in Venezuela right now, and we can see the results for what it is. But have you ever seen such reprehensible bullshit from a regulatory body? You're still muted, by the way.
Ah, yes, I am still muted. There I was just going on a tangent. Um, yeah, I look. The Competition Commission, unfortunately, got a lot of positive coverage when they had the bread scandal, if you remember. And they found that there was collusion on bread, and everyone was charging 12 rand a loaf. Um, and so there was this big collusion on bread, and the companies got nailed, and everyone thought that was a great idea because the poor buy bread, so it must be good if we punish companies, take 500 million rand from them, and then put it into the fiscus. And by the way, that money's gone. It's like that South Park episode, and it's gone. So they got a lot of good coverage from the bread thing because it was like, oh, look what they're doing for the poor, and the Competition Commission protects us. No, the Competition Commission is not designed to protect the public, really. In theory, on paper, that's what it does. But really, they're not in your best interest. They came out against the health sector, the private health sector, with what are, in my opinion, quite dodgy findings. They've now come out against the mobile sector, the telecom sector, and it's always the same sort of principles. It's always the same thing. It's always okay. The private sector has a profit motive. We don't like the profit motive, and we're going to find a problem with the profit motive. And it turns out that if you charge for things, then some people won't be able to afford them, and that's not fair because, I mean, typical socialism. And so you must find a way to give people stuff for free. Of course, if you understand basic economics, which is not a strong point of our government, all of whom failed Economics 101, then the minute you start enforcing that certain products and services are given to people for free, you either cause the collapse of a sector or you cause the collapse of the quality of that product. And so, yeah, we're gonna end up, if they push this, we're going to end up seeing that cell phone services, what will probably happen is that they'll split it. So they will not upgrade certain towers, for example. So we'll move to 5G at some point in the near future. You'll watch 4G, 3G remain in certain poor areas. They just won't upgrade those towers because they'll be giving free data, so it won't benefit them to invest in the infrastructure. And those people will be left with a worse off service, for which, yeah, they'll have free access to. So they'll work at about 1/10 of the rate that you and I work in areas where people do pay for the service. That's probably what's likely to happen. The alternative is that companies which are already under pressure, if you look at the share prices of both places like MTN, Vodacom, let's not even talk about Cell C, Blue Label Telecom's biggest mistake in their history. If you look at those share prices, those companies are under incredible strain. So what would be a really great idea for companies that employ tens of thousands of people? Let's make them give shit away for free so that there's even less income coming in through the bank account, and that'll definitely secure jobs and keep people employed. It's the same old useless shit. It's the same old ideology that we've been banging on about.
Yeah, I haven't read the Competition Act or whatever the fuck created the Competition Commission, but they never seem to probe the monopoly of Cosatu in the union, in the union space. They never seem to probe the monopoly that Eskom has or that Rand Water has over the, entire, or whatever, basically everything that's nationalized is never probed for being a monopoly. So it appears that there are different set of rules for a government monopoly and a purported private sector monopoly, which doesn't really exist in a fundamental sense. So it is just interesting that there are two sets of rules basically for what it is. But anyway, so expect to pay more for data going forward, because this is exactly what leads to this. If you have to give something away for free, listen, a trickle of water is still free water. You can fill a cup in half an hour, maybe. It's still free water though. So let's see what sort of things Vodacom and MTN come. Not that I'm a fan of those two companies, by the way. They're a bunch of dicks, very expensive, and completely uncompetitive. But of course, this is overreach from the Competition Commission.
The,
And
the, the real
Jonathan,
question
that's
is not
sort
about
of
whether
all.
whether
Yeah.
they are competitive, and I would agree. We've got essentially a monopoly on telecoms in this country. Data is too expensive. Calls are still ridiculously expensive. Everything is expensive. The question really is your choice is between those companies as they currently exist. Which, by the way, the fact that they're in monopolies essentially, and that there is not much competition between them, is exactly because of government. Because I cannot start a cell phone company tomorrow. I need to go through a whole bunch of government mandated processes to allow me to start a cell phone company. So the government is the obstruction to stopping the monopoly. So that's the first thing. Vodacom is not stopping people from starting a cell phone network. Neither is MTN, but they're happy that the government has rules in place to make sure that nobody else can start up in competition with them unless they have incredible amounts of funding and connections in government. So that's the one thing to say about that. The other thing is your options now are between a monopoly run by the likes of MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, and Telcom, or the government running the monopoly. So that's what you get to choose. And if I have to choose between those two evils, I'm choosing the corporate monopoly a million times over.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I can't disagree with that. Jonathan, just final thoughts. On my side, it's been actually a bit of a difficult year for the podcast. It's actually been a lot more difficult than previous years to get guests on and to be consistent with upload schedules. Next year, we sort of have to rethink how we're going to do this. Thankfully, Jonathan is going to be hopefully a little more free later on next year, where we can put a proper plan in place. On my side, I'm running 4 or 5 projects that are making money or hopefully will make money. So I have to focus on those. But we still love doing this and we'll continue to do this for the foreseeable future. We're not going anywhere. But we do understand that this year has been a little bit difficult, and we'd just like to thank you for listening to the show. I hope it has been useful. I hope it has been eye-opening, and I hope that you've made some decisions based on the advice you've heard here to protect yourself from state predation. And if that has happened, I mean, it makes Jonathan and I very happy, and we sort of done our job. But just a few key things before we go. Uh, don't trust the ANC, and certainly don't trust mainstream media. Don't trust us either, by the way. Just hear our arguments and see whether they make sense, of course. But treat everything with skepticism. Be agnostic on most things in life, and I think it'll serve you well into 2020.
Yeah, all right. I echo all of those sentiments. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everyone who listens to the show. As I've mentioned, just broaden your horizons in terms of the media you listen to. Just understand that the general stuff you're listening to that keeps telling you everything is fine. Basically, you've been sitting in that meme for the last 5 years, maybe 10, where you are the dog holding the cup of coffee and everything is on fire around you. And on that table is actually a radio or a newspaper or whatever it is from mainstream media, and it keeps saying this is fine, this is fine. Well, it isn't fine. Things are not okay, and you need to be able to be informed so that you can deal with the fact that things are not okay and you can protect yourself appropriately. But I wish everyone a really good sort of holiday season. Merry Christmas to those
Oh,
who celebrate.
come on, Jonathan, Jonathan. I know you're Jew, but you can tell people to have a Merry Christmas. Don't
I
be a
just did.
farmer and have a war on Christmas.
I,
Don't have
I
a
just
war on
did.
Christmas. It's
I'm
not
pretty
happy
sure I just did.
holidays or fucking festive season or festive cheer. Bullshit. It's Merry fucking Christmas. Jew,
I just said Merry
non-Jew,
Christmas.
whatever.
Um,
Good.
you're full of shit. Anyway, but yeah, enjoy the holiday period if you're going away or whatever you happen to be doing, and yeah, have a good one, and we'll definitely catch you in the new year. Hopefully with some great content, some new guests as well. As Ramon says, always a bit difficult these days, but doing our best. And we'll catch you next time. You can obviously find us on social media. One last plug. Ramon at Roman Cabernac, myself at Jonathan_Witt. the Renegade Report and Renegade_report on Twitter, Renegade Report page and group on Facebook. www.renegadereport.co.za is the website /support-us if you would like to give a donation to the show, keep us going, help us with some of the tech stuff that we do and need. And as always, much appreciated. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next year. Cheers.
Goodbye.